All right, so I get opportunities to drive some very unique and amazing vehicles. And for me, it's the community and everybody I meet along this journey of life. So this is one of those vehicles. As you can see, it's an incredible 4x4. And some of you might recognize this instantly. And others are probably wondering, oh, it's a Jeep or a Scout. Well, it is actually a Land Rover. And it's probably one of my favorite variants of the Land Rover. And no, it's not a Defender. This is a Land Rover Series II, 1962 model. And I would say it was probably Land Rover's saving grace. Now, the Series II came out in 1958. That was its premiere. And in fact, some of the designers behind it were part of the Whittle jet turbine team. If you ever look up the history behind it, it's phenomenal. You know, some of the British engineers and designers of some of these vehicles truly had a lineage of spectacular history from aviation to vehicles. So this amazing car is a 1962 Land Rover Series II. I apologize if it is windy, because it is very windy today, and I try to get in the shadiest spot I could find, but we'll do a quick walk around. So if you're wondering, what is a Series II all about? Is it different from a Defender or any of other 4x4? And yes, it is in a class of its own. Now, this particular design was based off the Series I design, which I believe came out in '48, and they made like somewhere near 42,000 Series IIs through its production realm. Now, this particular one is what I would say the first generation of the Series II. This has a essentially a 3. It's 2287 cc's, so essentially 2.3 liter. And 4-cylinder. It is mated to a 4-speed manual. It is true 4-wheel drive fashion. It has got a front and a rear differential, so there's no center transfer case, and gives a relative top speed based on how much tailwind you have, right around 60 to 65 miles an hour. So, you know, some guys say, oh, I only get 55 out of mine. Other guys, they'll say, well, I got 65 out of mine. I would just base it off, let's say 60 to be safe. 60 miles an hour top speed. This motor made an incredible 70 horsepower, but it's better than the Series I, which made, I think, right around 55 to 58 horsepower. It is what they had variants called the long wheelbase and the short wheelbase. And as you can see, the interior design is, well, it's bare bones. And I think that's probably the most incredible aspect about this car. I should say this truck. And of course, you could have variants such as bench seats. You know, this you could even get a roof for with windows. I mean, and this drops down. So why did I want to do a video on this? Well, I think these are probably one of the most unique and cool of the, I'd say, 50s to 60s 4x4 vehicles. They've aged very well. Like a lot of British cars, I feel that they've aged in a way that they have this allure to them. You look at one going down the road and you're like, that is really cool. But also some of the history behind these Series IIs is absolutely fascinating. If you ever look up like the Trans-African expedition, a lot of these, Oxford and I believe another group did these incredible expeditions with these. I mean, I'm not kidding. They drove these through the most hostile and barren environments and harsh elements known to man, and yet these went through it. Now, a lot of people say, well, it's a Land Rover, you must be working on it all the time. No, in fact, they're more reliable than you think. They're not fast by any means. And if you're looking at one of these as a daily driver, well, you need to be in the mindset that you're not going to be going places fast. It probably is going to leak oil. And you might be having a wrench on it occasionally. However, the cool factor and the unique driving experience that these make up for sets them above a different realm of 4x4. I'd much rather have one of these in this form in 1962 in today's modern world than a new Bronco, because there's just something about it. The driving experience of these, there's nothing else like it. It's probably one of my favorite vintage 4x4s that I've driven so far. Now, you could get a 4-speed manual with all synchros. This version, being that it's a 62, is a 4-speed manual. First and second have no synchros, so you need to be mindful of that. You got to literally double clutch them. Third and fourth are synchros. They have synchronous in the transmission, so those you don't need to synchronize. So be mindful of those. They're gonna be grinding them if you're fighting them. You gotta massage them. You gotta kind of talk to these to wake them up, to drive them. But when they're running, they're just beautiful. I've been smiling the whole time of driving this, so I really enjoy driving these. So if you're wondering, you know, one of these over a Jeep or a Scout, well, I think that comes down to preference, because I also think that, you know, an old CJ5 or Willys is phenomenal. You get an old Scout, they're phenomenal. And the engine variants that you could get in all those vehicles is phenomenal. But there's something pretty nostalgic and gentleman-like, is the best way to say, about a Series 2. You just see one of these going down the road and you're like, that looks good. That looks like an adventure on wheels waiting to happen. Now, when I was talking about earlier about maintenance-wise and, you know, are these reliable? I have not spent enough time with one of these to truly find out the reliability. And you're gonna hear a multitude of reviews, whether they are reliable, whether they're not. People hate them, they love them. And I think that just comes down to preference and what your expectation is set at to owning one of these. If you expect this to be the reliability of a Buick 3800 engine, and all you have to do is oil changes in its entire life, well, your expectations are probably gonna be pretty disappointed. However, if you have the mindset that, hey, this is gonna take me where I need to go, and it's rarely gonna leave me stranded, but I might have to potentially work on it here and there, and do a couple of tweaking here and there, then of course, that's gonna probably be the best experience you've ever had with a 4x4. Their climate ability is incredible. Their off-road ability obviously has a whole lineage of promising results, crossing, you know, half the continent in one of these. And this is essentially what turned the evolution of the series of the Camel Trophy into the real deal. The Defender is kind of what set the benchmark. Defender, if you ever look it up, the 90 and the 110 is the predecessor to these. And then you have, like, you know, the Discovery and other vehicle variants. But this really is what I find was the saving grace of Land Rover. And it is the reason why Land Rover is so well known today, is because I believe of the Series 2. Now that's my opinion. Some people might argue with that. Now, another question people say is, well, it's vintage Land Rover. Can you get parts for these easily? And the question is, absolutely. There's literally a page called Rover Parts that you can get any Series 2 Rover parts that you need to for these. I mean, I'm not kidding. New. All this is new. Well, maybe not new. Definitely new. All the suspension. I mean, you look at this. New. So you can essentially get any part you need for these. Brand new. That's the amazing part about these. Find yourself a vehicle that you can go online and order a new tailgate if you need to, and not struggle busting trying to track parts down. That's why I love things like the MG. I can literally go online, order any part I need. Stuff like my 68 Mercedes, that's a different story. I can't go online and order a brand new tailgate, seat, bumper. But the Series 2, you can get any part you want. So keep that mindset. If you're looking at one of these, parts are very easy to come by. Maintenance wise on the motor, well, like I said earlier, it is a single, let me pop the hood. It's, I believe, a Solix carb. And, sorry, Nugget. All right, see if I can pop this correctly. Give me 1 second. There we go. Yeah, so single Solix carb. Like I said, this is essentially a 2.3 liter, 4-cylinder, 70 horsepower, modernized cooling system to some degree. You know, these from the factory were quite well cooled, is the best way to say. Obviously, the wiring has been updated because this originally had the glorious Lucas Prince of Darkness, which I frankly have not had really bad luck with. I think it's been great, but knock on wood. There's a million other people that disagree with that. Very simple to work on. I mean, incredibly simple to work on. I would say that's probably the one thing to consider with these. When Land Rover came out with this vehicle and this design, look at the history of it. Their sole mission behind the design of this Series 2 was to not be an evolutionary upgrade from the Series 1, but, or I should say a revolution. What is the word? They had a special way of saying it. We're not gonna, it's gonna be an evolution, not a revolution. So they wanted to keep the premise of that if you are in the bush and you need to fix this, that the common man could fix anything that needed to be repaired in the field with minimal tooling. So that's something to consider. The great example is the rear main seal on this. On most vehicles, you got to either drop the transmission or the motor to get to the rear main seal. You do not have to do that with the Series 2. You can literally do all the repairs you need to without having to do any major engine or transfer case removals or transmission removals to get to the rear main seal. That's huge. In fact, they designed this motor to be rebuilt inside the engine bay. You did not have to remove the motor, theoretically. Like, that was just one of the premises that they did. And when they came out with this, is they wanted to have it an easy field repair. So here's a great example of what this engine bay looks like. Now, this thing obviously has been ground up restoed. I mean, this is as clean of an example as you can find, in my opinion. My buddy Liam, he's a friend of mine. We fly Moonies together. He has probably one of the coolest Moonies known to man. It's the Mooney Anomaly. If you've seen that, it's a multicolored Mooney M20F, 67 model, I believe. Good friend of mine. I'm down in Florida, and he, I flew him up north, and I'm down here, and he's like, go take the Series 2 out. I'm like, you don't need to tell me twice. So definitely took this out. Loving every single bit about this vehicle, and just the aesthetics of it and the driving experience. And obviously it's probably Otto's second favorite car. I think the MG is still his number one. So price point, that's where I think some people get a little tongue twisted with these. This does not have the price point of a CJ5 or a Willys. You can still go out and get those for sub $7 grand for a fairly good drivable one. These, however, in the restored condition that, like, such as this one is, you're gonna be paying a pretty penny for. Unfortunately, these are sought after. They're, I wouldn't say they're quite Defender prices, but they're not too far off. You're gonna be paying a pretty penny for one of these, unfortunately. And the days of picking one up for cheap, I think, are long gone. So that's one thing to consider when looking at one of these, is be in the mindset, even a beat up one that needs a lot of restoration work, it's still gonna fetch probably 15 grand, and I'm saying in rough shape. And a really nice restored one, I'd say maybe 30 to 70 grand, depending on today's crazy car market. So 70 will get you a really nice example, in my opinion. 50 will also probably get you a really nice example for a Series 2. So if you're looking at one of these, in my opinion, you can get a Series 1, you get a Series 2, you can even get a Series wagon. Heck, you can even get these in a diesel. Things to consider: 72 or newer has all 4 synchronized gears. This is pre-72, so first and second, you need a double clutch, or you'll grind them if you can't find them. The engine on these, the 2.3, is a phenomenal engine. It has been in Land Rover's existence forever. That block has been in Land Rover's existence forever. It's phenomenal. The diesels I don't know a lot about. I think they stopped production of those in the 60s, I believe. 61 maybe 63. I'm gonna quote that wrong. I'm gonna say that wrong, so don't quote me on that. But the diesels are good. Like I said, don't expect these to be doing highway speeds. These aren't fast. These are a small town in the city cruiser. Go take some back roads. This is a back roads vehicle, okay? Not a highway, back roads. So consider that. As far as a daily, if you're wanting a daily one of these, well, of course, if you're like in beautiful Florida and you don't mind getting wet occasionally with the elements, it's a phenomenal daily. Bring some tools. You might have to make an adjustment. It might leak fuel. It might be a pain in the start some days. This one obviously is ground up restoration, so it starts every single time. But overall, just be in the mindset. You might have to wrench on these a little bit. They're 60 years old, so keep that in mind. Other than that, it's probably one of the coolest 4x4s to come out of the 60s, in my opinion. And they just look utterly amazing. So enough of me talking. Let's go for a drive in this and cruise around in a 1962 Land Rover Series II. All right, so you got your ignition here. All right, she's a little warm, so it'll be like a hot start. 4-speed manual, first, second, third, fourth, and then reverses all the way up. You have your high, neutral, and low, and then press down for 4-wheel drive. So quite simple. Here's your speedo, top speed showing right at 80 miles an hour, 70 displayed. You got your voltage, your fuel gauge, and then this is amazing. This is the same gear gauges that are in my MG, and you got your water temp and oil pressure. So I put this in neutral, and then here is clutch is in. Here's the start. Get it loaded up. So like I said, first and second are not synchronized. So you need a double clutch to synchronize those, or you're just going to be grinding them all day, and that's not good for the transmission.
Look what's here.